So some of the main themes of The Lord of the Rings that we're going to be exploring in this course have to do with the impulse to protect and care for and nurture the diverse cultures of our world. And the primary story that unfolds in The Lord of the Rings is actually the title character, the Lord of the Rings, refers to its enemy, its villain, you could say, Sauron, the Dark Lord, and he is a force that you never directly encounter in the story, but he shapes the entire narrative, and his impulse is to bring all peoples, all cultures under his hegemonic control. He's a colonizer, he's an enslaver, he brings darkness and hopelessness wherever he goes. And this is kind of symbolized by the One Ring, which is the primary object of power throughout the story. And so, again, the One Ring, the sense of a kind of unifying force in a negative sense. Now, often when we think of something being unifying or that sense of oneness, we think of it in a positive sense, like spiritual unity and divine oneness. So this is a kind of inversion of that. And instead, Tolkien is celebrating in his story the many different peoples, the free peoples of Middle-earth, the elves, the dwarves, the human beings and their different cultures, the hobbits, the Ents, and so forth. And what happens when their lives and homes and their ecological embeddedness, when that is threatened, and how often sometimes uneasy alliances are formed when people come together to defend um, their home, their culture, their relationship to the earth, and against something that would be enslaving of that and colonizing of it and stamping it out. And so I think that The Lord of the Rings really is a myth for our time. And it continues to be a myth for ongoing times. I think that's a better way to put it. Tolkien said that he disliked allegory in all its manifestations. He said that in response to readers of his work thinking that he'd written it as an allegory of the Second World War. The book came out in 1954 and 1955 in 3 volumes. And so naturally, people assumed coming out of World War II that he was reflecting on that. But he'd actually started writing it before the war broke out. His close friend C.S. Lewis even made note of the fact that Tolkien would write something in a story and then something kind of symbolically comparable would happen in the external world, that his story almost seemed to be uh, prophetic of or tapped into what was happening in the collective. And so we can see a lot of historical parallels between what Tolkien was writing in his own time in the 1930s, 1940s, published in the 50s. Certainly, there are conscious echoes to World War I, which he actually fought within. There's echoes to earlier historical eras as well, and inspiration drawn from the great myths of particularly of the Nordic cultures, Nordic Celtic cultures. Uh, there's a subtle but deep connection to Christianity, nothing overt. He was very clear on the importance of that. As a devout Catholic, those are certainly themes that are present, but they aren't on the surface. He felt it was important for stories of fairy not to refer to any real world religions. So instead of allegory, he spoke of something called applicability, and that we can apply the themes and the patterns of this story, which is a very broad, complex story. So there's many different themes at play at any given time to different moments in history. And it certainly was very relevant when Peter Jackson released his film trilogy starting in 2001 with what was happening in world events back then. I think there's a lot that's relevant to our current situation. Anytime that it feels like the world is darkening, that it feels like there's just a small group of people kind of holding on to some light of hope and freedom and um, grace. That's a time when this modern myth is relevant. And so I can't think of a better time than now to be reading it and teaching it and learning from its many complex lessons that we can apply both at a collective level, but uh, even more so at an individual level as we try and orient in our time, as we try and find out, well, what is my task? What is my burden to carry in this particular time in history?